Good morning, Jill. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you and welcome to the Otago Peninsula Community Board meeting for the 24th of March 2022. It is my job to start with an opening reflection, and I guess one of the things is, say, for us here on the peninsula is the fact that we are starting to see the borders open a little bit, and some of the changes around COVID and mandates relaxed a little bit, and hopefully that will take off some of the pressure for our local businesses who have over the last couple of years boxed on, and I have to say a lot of credit to them really for the way that they have boxed on. And I suppose also finally just I guess to the people of Ukraine while they deal with the military issues there that they have with the Russians. It's certainly distressing to see that on television, and having been a child during the Vietnam War, I saw that in black and white. It's sad to see another war on the telly once again. So we wish all of those people our best from the peninsula. The public forum today, we're very fortunate to have students from Portobello and Mcandrew Bay. And we'll start through they want to talk about their annual plan and what they may or may not like to see happen from their schools and their community. It's a great pleasure to have you here, guys. It's lovely to have young people discussing those things with us. And we'll start with the Portobello school kids. I think if you'd like to introduce yourselves, and then we'll hear from you from there.
Kia ora, ko e matuku ingoa.
You just do your thing, everyone.
Okay,
Then
ko pariha mea tuku kura. We think Portobello is a great place to live. We have an awesome beaches, a great park, a community hall and a shop, restaurants and the pub, and since our last presentation, we are excited to see that the pump track is taking off and is now going ahead. I would like to see the food trucks come to Portobello more often because it is a nice way to support local businesses, and the kids can get an ice cream and go to the park and talk to their friends, and the adults can catch up. I would also like to see a dog park in Portobello because we don't have anything dog related, and it is important to have a little bit of everything. Also, it would be a good opportunity to socialise for dogs and to play in their own designated space. Thank you.
would you like to hear them all speak, Paul, and question them, or talk individually after each?
Well, I'd like just to hear all their views. That would be good.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
you know, we don't have the opportunity that often, so let's hear what they've got to say.
Kia ora, ko Wilson and Murphy. I would like to see the paddock pursuit back in Portobello because it is a great community event and it's so much fun, especially the big grass slide down the hill at the end. I think it would be a great idea to have 2 new pedestrian crossings, one at the shop and one at Coronation Hall. So it's safe to get from the park to the beach. It would be really great to see the old cannon back out near where it used to be. I also think it will be a great thing to have a vet practice here down in Portobello because we can go there instead of going all the way to town. Also, the peninsula has many pets and lots of households. Thank you.
Good job.
Kia ora, ko Grace tuku ingoa. I would love to see movie nights at Coronation Hall because it would be a fun thing to do on Monday nights. We could call it Monday movie nights. It would also be a good way to socialize with masks and social distancing, of course. And maybe if kids aren't interested in the movie, they can play in the playground. I also think we should have a yard sale in the domain or the hall to raise money for charities such as the Cancer Society or for schools around the peninsula. Thank you.
Kia ora, ko Phoenix tuku ingoa. I think it would be really great if there was a treat shop in Portobello again, because it would be nice to have sweets and milkshakes for when it's a nice day and people don't have to drive to town. If the Portobello sweets and treats were open, you can talk across the road and it would be nice for the kids. It would be great if there was a beach in Portobello like Mcandrew Bay and Broad Bay, because if you want to swim or relax on the beach, you have to drive to Ellen's Beach or Broad Bay. It would be good and a good, safe place for little kids to swim with no rips or big waves. Also, the beach would be great because it is not as deep as a wharf. We thank you for listening to our thoughts today.
Good job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Portobello School. Are there questions from the board to the Portobello School? Andrew.
Not quite covered off, but I'm wondering about how with the new cycleway and are many of the kids using that, and do all the kids have bikes or wheels?
I have wheels and I normally use the new tracks.
Are many children using them?
Yeah, I normally
Yeah.
see lots of people out. on
And
their
loads
bikes.
of kids have bikes and scooters and stuff.
Yeah.
And how would you like to be able to ride your bike all the way through to Tairoa Head?
Would you like the cycleway to go all the way down?
Yeah.
Whereabouts do you live, Phoenix? Are you at Harrington Point?
No, I'm at Broad Bay.
Oh,
Head
you're-
Power and Power are at
ah,
Harrington.
yeah, they are. So it's that is certainly something.
My
Any
brother,
other?
Carry
What
on.
was that?
my brother's very bikey, so he would love to go down all the way.
Very
Yeah.
bikey. It's a great word. Are there any other questions from the board? I'll just have a couple of things for you, Portobello. First of all, the pedestrian crossings that you raised at the Coronation Hall. There will be 2 pedestrian crossings put in hopefully sometime this year as part of the cycleway walkway development that goes through Portobello to the school. So there'll be crossing points there. The other issue for you is that there will be some raised crossings which will actually slow the traffic down and the speed of traffic coming through there. So that will make it safer for you to get to school. The old cannon, can I suggest that you ask Miss Neal to put together a letter to Warren Morris at the...
Which just happens to be Emma's grandfather.
Oh, there we go. Emma, you need to put the hard word on Grandad, because the cannon is sitting in the Peninsula Museum at the moment being restored. And can I suggest that you, I think, as I say, it's always nice to get mail. I think you should write a letter to the museum and ask them where they're at, and maybe they might even need your help. I don't know, but that would be a good idea from there.
Okay.
The pump track, I can tell you, as you know, they've got another $70,000. They have more to go. And some of the other things, I think the dog park one is another one as well that we as a board do need to discuss as well, because I've got 2 dogs now. And so the idea of a dog park is something certainly that's worth looking at for that area as well. Any questions for us?
Any chance?
Is there any chance of bringing back the paddock pursuit?
Well, it was my wife that used to run the paddock pursuit with a lot of other volunteers from the school. And I was actually the mud pirate. I used to dress up, or mud police. I used to dress up as a policeman to get everyone wet and muddy. Look, I don't know. It's one of those things, if you can get a group of people together again to run it and help with running it. It was certainly a great fundraiser for the school, but it needs more people. That's the reality, and you need to get some of the adults to get behind that as well. My kids are 18 and 21 now, so they've left Portobello School a long time ago, but that's not to say that it couldn't be run again, but it would need some new folk to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Portobello School. You are free to go, or you could listen to what Mcandrew. In fact, I think you should listen to what Mcandrew Bay have got to say, and we'll move over to them with Ms. Brown and Mcandrew Bay School.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. We're really excited about presenting our ideas, and well done, Portobello School. You will notice as we read out our ideas, you might have noticed that we were nodding when you were doing your ideas, because there are quite a few similar things on our list. So I'll hand over to the children.
We have made a PMI chart, and Maisie and Bridget are gonna read it to you guys. First is the positive that Bridget is gonna read.
Can you hear us all okay? Do you want to give us the thumbs up? Brilliant.
Some positives of the peninsula are great schools, the wonderful harbour and beaches, the walkway and cycleway that connects our community, beautiful wildlife, albatross, dolphins, penguins, seals, and birdlife, the gardens and plantings, the views we have, food trucks coming to Mac Bay, kind neighbours, friends, and community. And now we have the minuses. We need more shops, mini market, supermarket, etc. We need more affordable accommodation, housing for families. This is affecting our school role. We are worried about the speed some cars are travelling on Portobello Road. Maybe we need a bigger sign saying slow down or school. And now we have the interesting that Maisie is going to read.
Here are some things that we like that we could change about living on the peninsula. We could have Friday night movies at Mac Bay Hill. We would love to see outdoor exercise equipment scattered along the walkway. Electric cars, bikes, charging stations, a place where soft plastics could be collected. More murals of art. Perhaps we could have a wall or area where people were invited to add their own art. We are very keen to build our own pump track at school, but we need funding. We are keen to share our knowledge with the community, and we are working on a project this year that has QR codes to tell people about trees in our school and special places in our community.
We also noticed that there is now a ladder on the grey pontoon at Mac Bay Beach. So we're really pleased about that. So thank you for that. And did you want to say anything about the toilets, Connor? The Mac Bay toilets.
I think the boy Mac Bay toilets, the door's broken.
But have we noticed anything about the toilets since in the last wee while?
No.
Are they a bit cleaner, do you think, and a bit tidier? Yeah, so thank you again for that as well. We have noticed that the toilets at the Mac Bay Community Hall are looking better. So
A bit less of this.
a bit less of that, I would say, definitely. But Connor did say he was there recently and thought that one of the doors in the boys' toilets was looking damaged, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Connor, if you ever feel that there's something wrong with something that's run by the DCC, don't be afraid to ring 4774 000 and tell them what's wrong, and say, I think the toilet doors are broken in the Mcandrew Bay toilets. My name is Connor. I live in the area. I want to get that fixed. And if you don't get a reply, Ms. Brown will have my email address. She can send me an email and I'll follow it up for you. Okay?
Yeah.
It's probably a good opportunity while Jill's here, because one of the things that you raised was accommodation on the peninsula, and Jill is actually one of the new housing. I think it's housing officer or something along those lines from City Property. So I'll bring Jill in and perhaps she could answer some of the questions about accommodation.
Housing for families, is that the area or the group that you see are being disadvantaged by the prices?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jill, could you just say that again? We just missed the first part.
So you said something about affordable housing for families. As families, are the family group, is that the area that you've got the most concern about with regards to the cost?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And is that, and you said that that's impacting on your school role, the fact that are people having to move?
People are having to move, but also people aren't, you know, they aren't able to find, they want to come to our school, but they can't find affordable housing in terms of rental or, you know, obviously buying in the area. So it is having a big impact on our role.
And ditto that for down this way too.
So
Yeah.
the impact on your role, can you give me an idea of the numbers?
So we're probably down now at this stage around 12 children.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so we've got that July 1st roll return, and it's not looking great at this stage. We're hoping we get a few more children to come.
Okay.
It's fair to say, Jill, that the availability of housing, rental and housing on the peninsula is actually quite scarce. I wouldn't be a week where I don't see someone wanting accommodation, rental accommodation, or there's advertising somewhere on social media, notice boards of people wanting housing, especially people who have lived here for a while. Perhaps the house is because of the market that's being sold. Because at the moment house prices are mad, and if you bought a $300,000 house and it's now worth $650,000, a lot of people are selling those off because it's basically the profit is fantastic. So that is happening a lot, especially for perhaps some of the middle to lower income families around the peninsula as well. And we lose children going to town from all three schools. That's a regular thing that happens here.
Okay. So one of the things about me is that I come from Kāinga Ora. So I'm seconded into the council from Kāinga Ora, which is previously Housing New Zealand. And Kāinga Ora at the moment are doing their area development strategy, which will align with any upgrades and so on, and capacity of infrastructure for the council and future infrastructure. So I'll have a conversation with them. Absolutely, I can take that feedback
Cool.
back.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mcandrew Bay? I have, Andrew.
Paul, I just was going to ask the same question about wheels and cycling on the cycle pathway, and do all the kids have bikes, and are they all using it?
Yes, we see a lot of people using the cycle path, and I know that my family goes out there like once a week with our bikes.
Oh, so I just less of a question, but just a couple of things. One is that about speed. There is to be a raised crossing point from Marion Street across to Mcandree Bay Reserve. And the purpose of that is to slow the traffic coming into Mcandree Bay and make it a safe crossing point for people to come across from the reserve up to those areas. So that's supposed to be happening soon. It's not as soon as we would like it sooner. Murals and art, and I love this idea, and I would love to talk to you more about that. I know Graham MacArthur, who's our representative on Keep Dunedin Beautiful, would love to talk to you more about this as well, because I think there's a real place for that. I would also like to know more about your QR code project. I see a lot of value in having more informational signage around the townships and on the cycleway from that point of view. Charging stations is another one too. That's a really interesting one, particularly because of climate change and the need with electric cars. And I definitely see a need for that as well. And that's something that we as a board need to take on to affect change as far as climate change is concerned.
Paul, also the recycled plastic station, the soft plastics.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
That's another one as well. Give us some time. We will look at that, and we'll try and look at where, because perhaps Chris Henderson, Chris, you're lucky today, guys. You've actually got Chris Henderson from the waste part of the council. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am, Paul.
Would you be able to talk about the soft plastics recycling options?
The soft plastics recycling, now, unfortunately, I have to make it clear that that is not run by council.
Right.
That is actually the New Zealand Packaging Forum have a deal with waste management and some other partners for collection of that material and transport to future posts. So the soft plastic is turned into farming fence posts.
Right.
But it is an initiative. I mean, we support it, but we do not run it.
Right. Is there options for us as a board in Mcandrew Bay School and Portobello School to make contact with that organisation for something that would suit the peninsula?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you send me an email or something like that, I will put you in touch directly with the Packaging Forum and the people that run that scheme. Absolutely.
So Mcandrew Bay School, Portobello, if I get the contact details from Chris, I will send you that to you, and you can investigate that for your communities. Okay.
Great.
Other than that, guys, the pump track is an interesting one. I guess what I would say is having a pump track, do we need one or do we need multiple ones? I'm not sure we're big enough to have more than one. That's the only issue. So maybe it's a case of Mcandrew Bay and Portobello joining forces. I don't know. Maybe that's the same with the mud run, the paddock pursuit. Maybe it's a case of the two schools joining forces to fundraise for both schools. That's another option as well. There's safety in numbers, guys. Other than that, I'd like to thank Mcandrew Bay and Portobello School for your attendance today. There are a few things for us to follow on. I think Lauren will have notes on that from me, so I will follow up with those things. And guys, like I say, if there's anything you'd like to talk to the board about at any time, please feel free to come back. Remembering too that we do have a little sum of money that we do give to projects and other things as well. So if you had something that you thought was worthwhile, the board putting some money into, please don't hesitate to contact us. And I wish you well for the rest of the day. I'm sure it's just about morning tea. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Well done. You go with the elect now.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, Lauren.
Nick Watt, project manager for Peninsula Connection, hasn't actually connected into the meeting as yet, so I will let you know as soon as he arrives, but you might need to move through the agenda until he arrives.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, we'll move on then to item 3, apologies. I move that the board accept the apology for Hawani Langsbury. Thank you, Andrew. Confirmation of the agenda. I don't believe there are any additions or alterations. So I'll move that the board confirms the agenda as it is. Someone to second. Thank you, Graham. Item 5, a reminder that members need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arose between their role as an elected representative and any private or other external interest they might have. On that, we are required to update or amend anything on that. Is there any amendments to the register at all? No one's had a new job or anything else like that? No? Very good. Then I'll move that we confirm in the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Someone to second? Cheryl, thank you very much. Move on to item 6, the Otago Peninsula Community Board meeting of 3rd of the 5th. You have all had a chance to see the minutes from the previous meeting, and I move that the board confirms the public part of the minutes of the Otago Peninsula Community Board being held on the 3rd of February 2022 as a correct record. Someone to second?
Aye.
Thank you. Part A, reports, the Housing Action Plan, and we move on now to Jill Brown. The Housing Action Plan, you will see in your agenda, You had a chance to have a look at that and ask, and we'll move over to you, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know that I have ever had a chair who has been the mud police before. And I don't know that I've ever actually heard very bikey before, but I quite like that. I might
Very
take that.
bikey, yes. I thought
Very
that was quite a
bikey.
good word. It's very bikey.
I might steal that and use it. So kia ora tātou, my name is Jill Brown. I am the Housing Action Plan Advisor. Quick little bit of updates or how this came about. So Kāinga Ora, which is the new version of Housing New Zealand, and there's been a huge amount of money put into Kāinga Ora, and it now has much larger implications than just social housing, was restructured. And as part of that restructure, there was some decentralised positions in the Dunedin or in the Otago Southern space. One of those being a regional director, which means that some of the decision making could happen a little bit closer to the ground rather than having people fly in from Auckland or Wellington, or at best case Christchurch, to make decisions in Dunedin, Invercargill, Gore, Timaru, etc. I've been with housing for about, or with Kāinga Ora for about 4.5 years. And when the regional director came on board, he and Sandy, the CEO of DCC, identified that they wanted the partnership to be a bit tighter and a bit closer. So they both identified that they had work to do in that space, and I am now the conduit. So I'm a DCC staff member, but I am still officially paid and so on by Kāinga Ora, so I'm a gift. For Kāinga Ora, I'm the person who gets the right people around the table when they're talking about future developments, and make sure that they can get all the information they need to move things along. In the DCC space, my job is to create the Housing Action Plan. And the Housing Action Plan is effectively a review, a revamp, a relook at the work that's been going on in the housing space. Housing sits in a whole lot of little spaces across the council. So it sits in planning, it sits in property, it sits in consents, it sits all over the place, and there's not one person pulling all that together, and that person is now me. So when I came on board, the piece of work that was deemed to be the most recent was the Mayor's Task Force for Housing. So this will be an updated sort of regeneration of that, but it's looking wider. So it's not just looking at social housing and affordable housing, it's looking across the gamut, because as you may have noticed, we have a little bit of a housing crisis going on right now. So when I came on board last July, they said we'd like a housing plan, and I said, I'm not a strategist. They said, we don't really want a strategy as such. We want a plan that can be enactioned, because up until now, the actions that have been created are great, but they're not actually giving us the outcomes that we want. The outcomes that we want is we want more houses built. So for the first 6 months, all I've been doing is talking to people. So I've talked to anybody who will talk to me. Feel free to pass on my details or to contact me if you want to have another conversation. I'm absolutely open to that. I've talked to about 75 individuals and about 30 or 40 groups around what they see as needed to increase housing supply in Dunedin. And I've done everything from sitting with multi-million dollar developers through to sitting at the homeless shelter. So you name it, I have talked to it. And now I'm at the stage where I'm about to present all of that information, which I've themed up into 5 themes. I'm about to present that to the culture and community and culture, whichever way around that goes, committee on the 5th of April, which is the first outing that those themes will have, which then will inform the plan, which then will inform the actions. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, it's quite a nutshell, Jill, and I have to say it's probably a huge task given what we see every day and basically in the media around housing. Are there questions from anyone on the board? Andrew?
Jill, had the peninsula and the housing issues on the peninsula been raised with you before?
At a very superficial, quite high level. And obviously I've discussed with iwi. So I've had a conversation with Otago and Puketaraki, but specifically Otago. But at an individual level rather than any form of group level.
Okay. And the other thing that sort of came relevant to me, and like Paul, I'd seen many of the messages on the community Facebook pages about people looking for property to rent. Have you done much engagement with the school principals? Because listening to, obviously Cheryl and the teacher from Mcandree Bay, that's obviously going to impact school roles and families living in certain areas. So have you had much engagement with the school principals around Dunedin?
Short answer, no. I have talked to a couple of high schools, but not junior schools, because I hadn't actually thought that through. So I will be making contact now. And obviously there'll be places in, I'm assuming in like Ravensbourne and those ones on the other side, which will also be having similar issues. No, I haven't, and I will. I've taken a note to do that. Yeah,
especially I can understand the impact for that 1st of July. Maintaining teachers in schools in these sort of communities is extremely important.
So one of the things that my role includes is sort of to try and align everything, to try and make sure everything lines up. So there's a number of quite big groups that are quite big players. One is around the hospital rebuild. One is around the Kāinga Ora area development strategy, which I just talked about then, and obviously the DCC forward planning for infrastructure and so on. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to actually, or part of my role will be aligning the aspirations of each of those groups. Hadn't thought that through to school roles, and I apologise for that, but I will absolutely be making contact. Cheryl, if you would like to flick me an email, my name is Jill.Brown at DCC, that'd be great. Just note that it's Jill with a G. My mother, thanks to my mother.
Gil, I'd like to say thank you, because I know a lot of people want to live down here, but they can't, A, because of the lack of housing, but B, there's a lack of property land to build that housing on as well. So it's a double-edged sword. And our role is slowly dropping because the town's greener, brighter, and all those sorts of things.
And also there'll be areas of the peninsula, as there are in other parts of the city, where sea inundation or inundation zones are going to be overlays that are going to make building difficult. So that makes development difficult. So yeah, I can see those issues.
I know that in the board made a submission some years ago to the council's destination plan, maybe the first destination plan. And one of the things that we raised was that was not made enough of in the destination plan was the education opportunities that were at primary, intermediate and secondary schools to attract people to come here, establish businesses, to work here and bring skills here. Because one of the things we're actually blessed with in Dunedin is a fantastic group of schools. We have, our secondary schools are second to none across the country, and no matter what school you went to here, you get a good education. And I think we're a very mobile community now. People tend to, once their kids get older, mum goes back to work in town. We're a mobile community, and I think that's common through a lot of rural communities. And so the pressure on schools to retain roles from that is quite high. We often find that people move back to town, move away, sell their properties and move back to town as well, because of the pressures on travel and commute, and obviously the price of petrol. If it carries on like that, we'll all be working with horses and carts. But so yeah, it's really good. I thought it was quite telling that children from a school would raise the issue of accommodation, and where they got that from is, that's their own thinking.
Yeah.
So they know it themselves, and they must see it in the media and hear mum and dad talking about it as well. So it was that was quite telling, I think, from that perspective. And I know too that there's certainly pressures around Otago and the marae about people wanting to come home and live at home or be closer to the marae. And that is also another issue for us here as well.
And that fits with their aspirations of bringing people home.
Yeah, it is.
Or having people come home, be back on whenua land, but the way that the whenua land was divided is challenging around that.
Yeah, there is.
And so the building opportunities are tough.
I know that the district plan, the 2GP, changed a number of years ago around the creation of housing around marae. But we've yet to see that happen at the moment, obviously for a variety of reasons, and also land ownership is another issue in itself. Are there any other questions from the board? Well, I'd like to thank you, Jill, for coming, and like I say, I'm hoping you found it useful, and you're welcome anytime. And as I say, because housing is such a big issue for boards and for the community right across the board, so I don't envy your task. I don't think there's a magic bullet for it, but good luck, and I wish you well.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. And I'd like to say again, please feel free to pass my details on to anybody who would like to talk to me. The conversations that I'm having are ongoing. Just because we have a plan in place, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be, that the views given are not going to be included. So please feel free.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to just hop back now that we've got Nick Watt, Project Manager for the Peninsula Connection Project. Welcome back, Nick. It's been a long time since we've seen you. I'm sure we're all very excited for what you've got to tell us over the next few minutes.
Great, thanks, Paul. Good to be here. Thanks for having me here again. So obviously we haven't had a lot in the way of physical works going on the peninsula on the project recently, as we've been going through a procurement phase, which we can now say that Section 5 and Section 9 have been awarded to Fulton Hogan for construction, which I believe is a great thing in maintaining continuity of contractors on the project, heading into this next section to polish off through to Portobello. So these works will also include what we're calling separable portion 6, which is the Turnbull's Bay Culvert replacement works following the failure of the stone culvert under the roadway near Marangi Street. So the design work for the Turnbull's Bay Culvert is being undertaken externally to the project and is in its final stages as we speak. So there are still a few minor issues being ironed out by that design team in consultation with our contractor, but that is progressing well. So we are hoping those works will begin in April. We just need to be careful to look at the dates around that with the Easter holiday, obviously, and disruptions to the community in that area. So we'll be very cautious about when we're actually letting them apply any traffic management that will affect travel through that area. So there'll be correspondence coming out around that. We'll let Paul know so he can communicate directly with the community, and we'll go through the usual DCC channels once we've firmed up a timeline for when that work will begin. And the procurement team for DCC have also approved advance order of materials to reduce any scheduled delays on other portions of the project that may have been drawn out by the delay in the design works for this portion of work. The physical works for Section 5 and Section 9, which are the portions adjacent to Fletcher House and leading up and through the Portobello Township, are scheduled to start concurrently in June. So that is still on track for that date, although the Turnbull's Bay Culvert may have pushed that back slightly, but we hope to recover that in other areas and continue with that plan. We're also currently seeking additional funding of approximately $2 million to complete the shared path connection via a boardwalk through to the Portobello Township. initial designs through the portion past Coronation Hall did not come to fruition, where we had intended to use the space available to safely transition shared path users and road users through that portion. So that is currently under consideration, and we hope we can find that additional funds to make sure we complete that full shared path connection. And in general, the project is progressing well through a lot of challenges at the moment with COVID and design delays, but we're tracking well to recover a bit of time loss, and we're still tracking very well under budget on the project itself.
Questions from the board? Locks?
Olga,
No, you're muted. You're muted.
while he's sorting that, can I just ask a question, Nick?
Yep.
And I should know the answer already, but what's the timeline on the area past Portobello School here, down to where the bus turns around?
So it's still in design, but it's currently is 2028 is the timeline for completion of that area.
Okay.
So the current works package that we'll be doing through Portobello ends at Allens Beach Road. So we have talked about sourcing options for additional funding from other areas of council to improve the footpath through that area from a safety perspective. So that is being looked at by the Transport Department. But I have not received any further advice on that at this stage.
Locks?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Very good. You talked about a boardwalk. Could you just clarify that, please? Because we have some concerns.
So there's a section of 200 metres between the Portobello Boating Club and just past Coronation Hall. So that section we do not have the space to install. We don't have the width to provide both a safe pathway and the required road space for the lanes as well. So the option that is being investigated is a boardwalk through that section.
So why not reclamation? Why isn't there reclamation being considered in design?
There's no consent.
Yes, so there's a specific requirement that that portion of the existing seawall remains as is, as a historical perspective.
Well, I can understand that, but you can cover it up. People can dig it up later on to have a look if they want to. I don't know what's historic about it. Given my local knowledge, I just find that to be bizarre, because I think it's critical that we have a decent road access coming in through into Portobello there, and a boardwalk really is not going to solve the transportation problems given the capacity for the road at the moment, and the capacity will increase. So I would certainly not be in favour of a boardwalk there, but then again, I think reclamation is the only true answer.
But there's the issue though, Locks, is there's no consent for it from that section of the harbour, and to gain the consent we could be pushed back several more months, if not another year. And the boardwalk option was the provision that was presented to the community last year.
So who said that the wall was historic? Whose decision was that?
It's the wall is a pre-1900 structure, so it's under the guise of the Historic Places Act.
Oh well, no, okay. If that's the explanation, that's fine. I know, in my view, is it's reinforcing failure, but however, we've got to go with what we can get.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, and I guess one of the things, Nick, is I'm not a great fan of surprises. And one of the concerns, the really big concerns I have, is why we are only going to Allens Beach Road, given the fact that what was presented to the community and to the board and was told to us was that this project would go as far as the raised crossing opposite the school. And the question I would have for you is, who made that decision, and why was the board not informed of that? And why was the community not informed of that?
So I'll have to go away and get some more solid answers for you on that, Paul. Obviously, that's before I was on the project itself. So
No, stop for a moment, because that part of the design through to Portobello School was presented to the community as part of this last year. And there was never been any discussion with the board or with the community that that part of the project through the cutting past the school would not be included in this year's construction. And what I'm asking you is, who made the decision to take that out?
So my understanding is that the what was consulted was through to the Portobello Township at Harrington Point Road transition.
Stop. Can I just ask every board member that's here now to raise your hand if you remember the design consultation process that we saw went through to the school?
And I was just looking back at these, Paul. It says in here that that was going to happen this year.
So the 6 members of this, well, 5 members of this board and the city councillor were all under the impression and were all told as part of the consultation process that it would go through to the school, because now what you're telling us is that this will no longer occur until 2028. That is news to this board, Nick, and very big news and very disappointing news for the fact that we were not informed, nor was the community informed. You're making fools of us by asking us to undertake consultation with a community whose expectations are based on the information that we give them. You have not provided us with that information, and nor has the City Council. And that is disappointing from that point of view. And not only that, but I am now expected as a board chair to go back to my school in my district and tell them that they're not going to receive that for another 6 years, when they were promised that a year and a half ago. Who made the decision to cut that out of the project?
I appreciate what you're saying, Paul, and I apologise that I don't currently have that information to present to you, but I will provide you with a formal response with detailed information.
Well, the problem that I have is, as I say, we have gone through this process for Portobello. We have sat and waited. You started a section last year. We sat and waited. We were never told eventually that the thing was going to stop. And then we've sat with an unfinished part of the project for some time. The second question I would ask you, Nick, is why now are we being told in a meeting that you are seeking additional funding of $2 million for a boardwalk, when the boardwalk was part of the initial design that was consulted with the community? And yet you're telling us that the budget is on track. If it's on track, where and why are you seeking another $2 million from?
So the phasing of the project, so while the budget for the project through to 2031 for the total cost is $103 million, and we are tracking $6 million below that value to completion. So the funding timing is, it's more about the timing of when we can get the funds on the project to complete those portions of work. So what we're trying to achieve is to complete that boardwalk at this phase of the project, so we have a safe shared path connection right through to Portobello, and we can also improve the road at the same time through that area and safely.
So question is, when are we likely to see the boardwalk from the boat shed to the old cannon site?
We would hope that this will be completed in conjunction with the Section 9 works in 22-23 financial year.
And so where is this additional $2 million coming from?
That I cannot say at this stage. That is being, I have requested additional funding to be attributed to the project within the financial year. So that is currently being investigated by Transport for potential options to achieve that.
Is it fair to say that the slump at Turnbull's Bay, the money to pay for that has come from this budget?
No, it certainly has not. That has come from other areas of transport. While it is all wider transport funding, the bulk of the funding on the Peninsula project itself is from Wakakautāhi, which is in a separate bucket. So it is very different funding sources.
Well, 55% of the funding is. The rest of the money from comes from the DCC as part of the 10-year local annual plan.
The other significant effect has been the increase in material costs over the last 18 months, which has affected where our funding sits into relation to what we can actually achieve with that amount of money.
But surely capital costs are related to CPI, and adjustments to CPI are made as part of the bulk funding that's made through both Wakakautāhi and the DCC.
Correct, but there's been extreme increases in a very, very short period of time in terms of material cost and labour cost.
Are there any other questions from the board?
I don't, mine's not a question as such, but I have to say I'm really disappointed to hear that it's not through the cutting to the school is not going to be done, you know, for another 6 years. I mean, that was always a safety issue.
And that is absolutely a safety issue. And the fundamental factor is that the council and the project team basically consulted with the community based on that. Now, we went through a lot of work as a board to support the council and the project team to get that over the line. And now you come to this meeting and throw this bombshell at us without us having any knowledge of it. The question I'd ask you, Nick, is what has happened to the level of communication with the board? Up until 2 or 3 years ago, it was pivotal to actually getting this project over the line. And now that seems to have disappeared.
I appreciate that, Paul, and I apologise for the lack of communication there. As I've said, I will produce a formal response for the board in relation to the works through the cutting, and I'll speak to you directly also once I've done further investigation into the what led up to this miscommunication occurring.
Well, I'm sorry to have to ask you difficult questions and to do so in a manner that really expresses my displeasure at what I've heard today. And the board's displeasure at that is not a personal thing, Nick, but frankly, it is difficult for us as a board to represent the community when we're only being given half the information or none of the information at all. And like I say, we have been pivotal to getting this project over the line. And I really feel that the lack of information that we have is a little bit disrespectful for the board, to be fair. I really do. We have made a lot of work and done a lot of work. I look at what Graham did with the Broad Bay people over the trees and the compromises that were made on the landscaping. It was that work that helped to get that project, part of the project, done. I'm sorry, but I'm very disappointed with this, and I really do have to express that quite vigorously. Andrew.
Yeah, Nick, I appreciate that you're the bearer of the news, but as a city councillor since 2013 and having watched this and the presentations from the community board with the school children, right from the early stages. And as we went through this process, I can tell you every councillor was fully engaged with that going through to the school. And I'm sort of blindsided like Paul is on this, and I think that's something that needs to go back through. But I also don't recall seeing any of that in any reports to council either. And so, yeah, the schools were a very big part of the campaign and getting this done effectively and for the whole community. You know, many of us councillors are still bitter the fact that we actually haven't gone all the way through to Tairoa yet, and how long it's going to take. But to leave off that segment with the school is going to be, again, a distressing news to many of the city councillors as well.
It's very distressing for the community. I mean, Cheryl Neal is one of our school teachers there.
Yeah.
And the other issue with that, Nick, is a significant amount of work was done with the school over the land exchange issues. And the school's expectation is that, as I say, that those issues will be resolved as well.
And by end of 2023 was my understanding.
Yeah, exactly. It was going to be part of this work package, and we would see it finished by the end of mid-2023. So I'm afraid, my friend, you will have to go and seek some answers from council on that, because like as Councillor Wiley has said, it's not gone to council. So something needs to be passed on to the board from that perspective.
Yep, I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, and I fully understand how crucial that is, especially in relation to the school. So I will collect that information and I will come back to you formally.
Thank you, Nick, for your time. Please forgive my venom, but like I say, I don't like surprises. Cheryl, you had one more question?
Oh, not for Nick. Just I was wondering, shall we have a 5-minute recess?
No, I'm quite happy to. Do you want a 5-minute recess?
I was just gonna go to the ladies.
Oh,
You're allowed.
Thank you.
yeah, Paul,
Yeah.
would you mind if we had a 5-minute recess? Thank you. Nick, you're free. You can do what you need to go do. Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back, Cheryl.
Thank you. All good.
Less information, thanks, Dov. On the basis of what we've just heard from Nick, I do feel that the board should write to the Chief Executive, Simon Drew, and also the Mayor on what we've just heard there, because there are serious implications, not only for the board, but for the community. So I will move that we will write formally on that and ask for some explanations. All those in favour?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Graham. Oh, right. We move on to the Governance Support Officers Report, Section 9. If you're like me.
You're actually on the community plan first, and then
Oh, I beg your pardon. Community plan.
Mm.
Are there major items that need to be added? I know I've asked this before, and I know, are there anything in the community plan you think that need to be changed radically, or that our priorities from that need to be changed radically?
Well, from me, there's nothing from me, Paul.
Cheryl,
sorry, I haven't got it in front of me, but
no, that's fine.
I do believe we talked about the road, the seawall in Harwood.
So
that's still there.
yeah, so I wondered if you would just draft something up, and I will make that as an addition to that.
Okay.
The question for priority is probably reasonably high, given that it's a flooding inundation issue from that point of view. Lox, did you have anything specific? Are you still comfortable with where we're at with our priorities? I think we're still reasonable to you.
Yeah, no, everything's tickety-boo there at the stage. There's only one or two adjustments, I think, with the, I think it was a response things. I see there's, we have to change a few names for the halls and points of contact for that there. And I've been in touch with Andy.
Yeah.
Everett, he wants to hold a small desktop exercise with the board members and one or two people from around the district.
Okay.
Tabletop, he's done it with other boards. And there's one or two changes of addresses and things a bit. I've got a draft here, which I'll send flick through to Lauren anyway.
Yeah.
To get that sorted out, so I can.
Cheryl, would you do the same just in relationship to the Tidewater Drive issue and send that to Cheryl for addition to the priority list? Thanks. Graham, anything particularly that stands out for you in terms of priorities from that point of view?
No, I don't. There's nothing that I don't think isn't being handled in some other way. Yeah.
Don't be afraid also to, if you've had some bright idea that you would like to add to the priority list, feel free to do that. And what we'll do is between the next meeting is thrash through those things. If there's something that you really feel passionate about and want to add, then let's do that. It won't probably get into our submission for the annual plan this time round, but it's something that's worth debating for the future.
Can I stick my hand up there then, Paul, and suggest we put the dog park in there?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good idea. Whether that's either creation or just the beginnings of investigations of dog park options. Can you write something up for that and get that to Lauren, and we'll have a discussion on that too?
Can do.
Cool.
There is one thing that's sort of been niggling at me a wee bit, which is the boat ramp at Portobello.
Yes.
And I was going to talk about that just a little bit later on, but it seems to me that it actually is increasingly becoming important because it will take a little bit of pressure off Broad Bay and also Weller's Rock but there is some issues there for the boat club at the moment as well. And it's one of those things that seems to have fallen through the cracks a bit. And I think unless it's addressed a little bit more formally, it's just going to remain the way it is, which is pretty unsightly and of no use whatsoever, and a bit of a waste of part of that recreational area.
It was part of that original development too, and it just sort of, like you say, it slipped through the cracks. So do you want to take the lead on that, add it into the priority list, and then we'll work out a bit of a strategy about where we go in terms of communicating that with the community and working on that? Because it seems to me, I mean, it does need to be done, there's no doubt about it. But every time we seem to have taken a step forward, we've taken a couple of steps back on it.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, maybe we need to address it in a different way, but I think we need to follow up and find out what's happened to the resource consent on it, because that hasn't been clarified, and nothing can happen until we get that sorted out as well.
As I understand it, I think that resource consent now has passed its use by date. It's passed.
It has lapsed.
Yeah, it's lapsed. In which case, to build a ramp, another ramp there would require a new consent from the regional council. The issue has been finding what actually the true cost of actually developing that from would be, and then finding the funding to that. And I think that's the first step. We actually need to know what would it actually genuinely cost to actually put a proper ramp in there.
Well, there may have been some work done on that already, because one of the things that happened with the boat club at the time that the boat shed was being replaced was that the council were looking at the possibility of the boat club and the community sharing that ramp, and so the boat club not having its ramp replaced like for like. In the event, the council decided that they didn't want to go down that path, and so they left it with the boat club having like for like replacement. However, since then, the council have come back and asked the boat club about the possibility of using the boat club's ramp as a public ramp, which has some real problems now.
Yeah, well,
and was never part of the situation. So obviously there is some other thoughts about it happening in other places.
Yeah, there's definitely demand, and there's definitely people that want it. And that one of the bugbears has always been around car parking, but it seems to me that temporary trailer parking could be an option near Coronation Hall from that point of view, and it would just have to be that it's managed so that we don't end up with permanent people with their boat trailers there. Would you mind?
They shouldn't be there in the first place, Paul. There's no room for boat trailers. It's
no,
that's Broad Bay.
That's right.
All those got to be gone from Broad Bay.
Yeah, it would be purely a launching ramp. It would.
Yeah, it would be. Would you mind digging down into that a little bit more, Graham, and perhaps coming back to the next meeting, or even contacting me later and see where we go with it? Because I know there has been demand, and there's been various starts to this, but it's never got quite off the ground. And I know that there were lots of issues around the like for like issue with the club and other bits and pieces. So I'll let you dig that down. That's something that you I would welcome you to do it, to be honest. And let's see where we go with that, because I do think, I guess it raises the other issue is having a wider recreational boating and water access strategy for the entire harbour. It seems to me that it is something that we're actually lacking, not only from the peninsula side, but also for West Harbour. And I guess it involves both the regional council and the Dunedin City Council from that point of view. There's been improvements to both maintenance and the types of facilities, but we do need a wider, what is the strategy for replacement? What is the strategy for rebuilding? What is the strategy for changing technologies and boating and those sorts of things? So yeah, I always has felt that the harbour needs a recreational strategy for a wide range of different users. So it's powerboats, it's yachters, yachting, it's divers, swimmers, it's all sorts, kayakers, all of that, and then the commercial operations and then as well that go around. So it always a multi-layered plan really is required, and a plan not only about what the aspirations might be, but also where funding might come from in the long-term plan and the annual plans of both councils. But that's an aspiration of mine, but I still think that the harbour is probably one of our underutilised and probably underrated assets in the city. And part of that is around accessibility to it for boaties and for users in the long term. So that Portobello issue raises a whole lot of other issues.
Could be part of Hoani's portfolio, because I see here he's also Port Otago Technical Committee.
It might be a bit of a conflict of interest here, Locks. It might be one of yours. Might be one of yours with your search and rescue and Coast Guard experience.
Well, the thing is that they have a harbour master here now, and he seems to have things under control.
Yeah, he does. But again, the harbour master's role is not necessarily around implementation of recreational facilities and accessibility, and that sits with both the regional and the Dunedin City Council. And I think that's why a global strategy for the harbour is actually really needed on both sides of the harbour. All right. Yes, Edna.
One of the things in our community plan covers community-wide improvements to street drainage and footpaths. Now, it doesn't have a priority. And although I guess for the whole community, it's sort of, we work on bits as they happen. But one of the issues for me is still Beaconsfield Road footpath and safety around the kindergarten. And that seems to have drifted along and gone nowhere. And I'm just wondering if we should specify that as a separate thing and prioritise.
Yeah, and the other one for me is also Allen's Beach Road. The access between treetops. There's been various stalled attempts by the community to raise that with staff, and that needs to also be. So if you want to separate those two as priority and give them a higher priority rating, I'm quite comfortable with that. If the rest of them order. One of the reasons that the street-wide drainage issues, especially around Mcandree Bay as an issue, is because of the flooding that's associated with those areas being on hill slopes. And with climate change, accelerated rainfall and that sort of thing, those areas are going to be under more pressure over the next 10 or 15 years as we have bigger and more stronger storms. And our drainage systems and our street drainage systems need to be upgraded to actually cope with those areas, and also to make sure that we're not flooding people's homes or having landslips as well. Cheryl, you had something.
Oh, no, it's all right. I was just thinking about the kindergarten, how it's moving to the old play centre building here at school. So the effect of children and all that traffic might be reduced somewhat.
Yeah,
that road still, there is still a real problem with that road though.
There is. Beaconsfield Road has always been an issue, and there's parts of it that have got foot access and some of it that don't, and people walking on the road. It does need. The other issue is that there will be development in that area in the future, because there are some unformed legal roads that adjoin property that is suitable for residential subdivision, and that will place greater pressure on the needs for pedestrians in that area as well. So I think it's worthy of keeping that in mind to the council from that perspective, especially since what we've heard from Jill today about housing.
Yeah.
Are there any other items for the community plan at all? So you've got your various bits and bobs. If you want to flick that to Lauren, we'll add that as a draft and we'll discuss and finalise that at our next meeting. That's all good. We'll move on to item 9, the governance support officers report. I just need to find the report. I'm looking at the minutes. Sorry about that. You'll see that we are still quite financial. Just on that though, before we talk about that, I would like to move that we have a little bit of additional funding available for the implementation of Dave Cole's plaque. We do need to pay. We paid for the plaque itself, but we need to pay for the installation. I can't tell you exactly the cost of that money. It won't be a lot, but I would move that the board support paying for the installation of the plaque from its fund.
Don't move.
Second, all those in favour? All right, thank you very much, Locks. The on Dave Clark's plaque, if I can just
Dave Cole.
Dave Clark. I will share with you just, you should be able to see this. Can you all see that?
Yes.
This is the seat just at Chalice there, just below where Dave and his wife lived, and so that's where the plaque will go, on the concrete plinth by the seat, so that Joan and her family can sit on the seat on the walkway overlooking the harbour on a decent day and just reflect on the things that Dave achieved for both the city but also for the peninsula in relation to the cycleway.
What does the signage say, Paul?
Oh, I knew you'd ask me that. It's dedicated to the memory of Dave Cole, CNZN, 1st of April 1950 to the 27th of April 2021, the 57th Mayor of Dunedin. Dave believed in a greater Dunedin needed to be a connected community, and as a cyclist and mayor, the Peninsula Pathway was part of that connected vision. And then there's a quote actually that was given by the Runaka. I can't quite see it even with my glasses on, but basically what the quote says is that that he believed in he was a man that believed in a connected community. And then there's on the left, there's a little cabbage tree silhouette and a cycle wheel at the same time from that point of view. And that will be installed hopefully over the next coming weeks. And we will have a small ceremony with Joan and the family and one or two others just to open that for him. As I say, he was the mayor he lived on the peninsula, but also, as I say, that connection for us has been a big deal, and so that's been part of it. Is everyone comfortable with that from that perspective? I think it's a nice tribute, and I think it's a nice way to remember Dave from that perspective. Cool, thank you. So yes, all right. Just the Liam Donovan scholarship. Edna, obviously that's been put on hold because of COVID.
Well, it was, yes, and I don't think that their next, I'm not sure if they're having it this year at the same time as they would have had it last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I can find that out, but I think it was just put on hold for 12 months because of COVID. They couldn't go. And I think he was due to go in November.
Yes,
from memory.
Yeah, that's December. I think what you could do is say to the family, we're happy to hold that over if another opportunity. I think we did that for the other one who had a scholarship because of COVID. I think that's fair. Otago Access Radio, I'd like to move that we pay the $79.99 for the round the board segments. If someone to move, I move that. Someone to second. Thank you, Cheryl. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Basically, once a month, I talk for about 10 minutes on that about what the board are doing, and it's actually been quite a useful thing.
We'll be busy next time.
So the draft annual plan, you'll see that update for the draft annual plan this year proposes no significant changes to the 10-year plan. I would argue that we have some significant changes, given the fact that the Otago Harrington Point section is not funded for the connection. And from what we've just heard today about the connection project, that's quite serious for us as well. There will be an engagement process, and what I would ask the board is to delegate the submission process to the annual plan based on discussions we've had over the last year and our priority list from the community plan to be the basis of our submission this year. And I'd move that that I, as the chairman, be able to undertake that on your behalf.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Edna. And I'd also ask for the same on the same motion for the regional council as well.
Yeah, yep.
The regional council's discussions principally would rest around health of the harbour and also public transport. Just a continual reminder that public transport, we've had improvements, let's be fair, I think, on public transport. It's not perfect, but it has got better over the last 3 years since we argued with the council. And I think it's just a reminder to council that we are still wanting to see improvements all the time. Cheryl.
They still haven't addressed the Bayfield to Mcandrew Bay bus issue, which Mr. Phillips promised us he would nearly 2 years ago now.
Can I ask you to write to him again and CC that to Lauren? I have seen a couple of emails from those conversations saying, yeah, we're getting onto it, we're getting onto it.
Yeah, yeah.
The necessity of that in terms of the COVID mandates has changed a little bit, but still the very fact that we need 2 buses to run in that afternoon session indicates that the bus is being well used. And given the fact that the bus is now only well, it's $1 for me to catch the bus at the moment, and it's 60 cents, I think, for children at the moment. So we want to keep doing that. The engagement from the annual plan this year is going to be slightly different, and it's interesting to see how the council is tracking against the year 10 plan. And again, I would certainly have some questions, I think, from the board on where we're at with the Peninsula Connection project. I think it's also fair to say that given also that what we know in relationship to the loss of this, I mean, it was the City Council that removed the funding for the Harrington Point Otago section about 3 years ago as part of the annual plan process. That funding was removed by Council. The business case for that still remains, and Waka Kotahi, as I understand it, have never changed the business case for that. What I would, at this time, my understanding is that Michael Wood, who is the Minister of Transport, is supposed to be visiting Dunedin, and there's some discussion about Michael visiting, the Minister visiting the Otago Peninsula. I would like the board to request the City Council that we be involved in meeting with the Transport Minister, that we have an opportunity to not only show the benefits, but also the disappointments that we have from the Council's removal of funding for Harrington Point. And so I'm going to ask you to allow me to formally write to the Mayor and Chief Executive to invite members of the board to meet with the Minister when he visits, or if he visits here as part of that process. Does anyone have any objections to that? Someone to second?
I will.
I wasn't putting my own hand up.
Yeah, no.
The other point I would make on that too is that I spoke last year with members of Turonia Otago, and I have received a letter from them indicating their support for the board to pursue the Harrington Point Otago area for widening as a safety issue and a priority for that community. So, and that is important for them to come out and say that on the behalf of their community. And that's another reason why, as I say, I think we need to be part of that conversation with the Minister of Transport when he visits here.
I assume that the sitting member of Parliament responsible for our area will also be attending.
Mr. Clark, I would imagine that he would be here. I wrote to to David Clark 3 years ago, asking him whether or not the funding would be returned. Unfortunately, I never had a reply, but
perhaps it's timely to remind him.
It's probably timely, yes, that he does. Other issues here, item 7, there's engagement around community diversity. And it looks as though we appreciate that community can effectively reach out, and content is developed, sent through all community boards with sharing with communities. And there's going to be some feedback on that from there, item 9, 23rd of May. And we are also going to be able to present our views, the dates of which I don't know. Move on to updates, and I know that we had quite a large number of updates because there have been a few issues, and perhaps also with COVID, we've had some distancing from staff and other things. The Marine Parade fence, I know you asked that question, Edna. There is a revised plan being sent out on the 25th of March. So we look forward to seeing that, because that seems to have taken some time. The sea lion fence at Allen's Beach, Hooper's Inlet, there's a temporary fence there. There was some 15 sea lions in pups there at the moment. And at the moment, the City Council are waiting for Heritage New Zealand's final report after a 15-day stand down, so that resource consent can be issued for that. Mcandree Bay Platforms, those are the crossing, that is the crossing points.
Paul?
Yes,
so just the sea lion pup area in Allen's Beach at Hooper's Inlet. Also, is there any update or feedback on what I saw in the newspaper about and on Facebook about the motorcycles around that area and trail riders or whatever?
No, and it's an interesting one. It's a very localized event, I think, and it does happen from time to time. I don't want to downplay that. There hasn't been a huge amount of feedback in the community about it. It's probably been more external than within the community itself. Like I said, I don't want to downplay it, but I do know that people do from time to time. People also ride horses in that area as well. It's not something that you would see there day after day, weekend after weekend. And it's certainly not something that you see people bringing motorbikes from out of town to that area to do that. So I guess it's a question of the Department of Conservation monitoring that situation and having some degree of liaison with people, as opposed to necessarily having those things in the media. I'm not sure that that article was entirely helpful. I think the real thing there would have been communicating around what's going on in the site. But that's a personal opinion. That's not a board opinion.
I can tell you, Paul, from experience, that in fact, long before the sea lion pups decided, or the parents decided to bring their pups up there, there was always kids riding bikes on the beaches there in bits and pieces, and it never caused any issues or problems at all. And it's just like I said, it's a localized thing. I think that some people, you can't have the batter too close to the eyeballs when some of these things appear, and I think it's just leave it alone. I think we've just got to leave it alone. The fact is that if we're advertising about the sea lions to go there, more and more people are going to go, and therefore you're going to increase the likelihood of people coming down there that wouldn't normally come and could possibly bring their two-wheel bikes.
Yeah, and I think the issue is that the more permanent fence will help in somewhat from that perspective. One of the issues with the permanent fence is not just about actually managing the sea lions, it's actually managing the visitors to that site as well, because there are people there a lot, especially over weekends, and there's some parking issues and other bits and pieces which need to be resolved. So yeah, just as I say, I'll take that newspaper report with a grain of salt, but really leave that to the Department of Conservation to manage if need be. And again, I think it's a communication issue and rather than an enforcement one.
It's a popular loop walk track, in fact, from there,
it is.
From the beach, right to the mouth of Hoopers, and back along the edge of the inlet,
yeah,
and then back to their car again.
And to be fair, I'm a regular beach walker there, probably go a couple of times a week, and I'd be lucky to have ever seen motorbike tracks there very rarely. There are from time to time, but it's not something that's overly bad from that perspective, but that's another issue. Mckendree Bay Platforms, which we were talking about, which is the raised crossing platforms that that the kids actually talked about today from Mcandrew Bay School. Transport are awaiting revised prices, and they will be installed this financial year, which means the end of this financial year is July 31st. So that's a positive for that community. The shared safety, you remember we had a presentation from staff in February about that. They are now completing the site visits and reviewing what changes are needed as a result of feedback, and the contractor is now looking to develop new stencils for that as well. Roadside spraying, remember it was like a hiss and a roar last year. This year it's been a little bit quieter. 50% of the roadside spraying of the peninsula has been completed, but there will be some more done. I noticed Portobello Road's got quite a lot of broom on it, so there's some things that need to be up there. The positive news is that there is funding, as I understand it, from the council's existing program for a basketball court to be installed as part of the Turonia beach project. And so there are 4 of these to be established across the city, and Turonia has actually been one of the ones to secure that, as I understand it from that. Update on the artwork at Tomahawk. We're still waiting for some engineering issues. This has gone on for quite some time. I'm still looking forward to seeing this happen, but it has taken about 2 years to get to this stage. And the PO is actually being completed, so there's been some delays with supply, but let's just fingers crossed we see that over the line, because Tomahawk needs it and it deserves it. I asked the question of staff recently around the pump track. There's a memorandum of understanding with council over the use of the Portobello domain. My understanding is that we should see that finished by March, end of March, and the reason that we need it done is for funding, the allowance for the group to continue with funding from that point of view.
I can just add to that, Paul, I've been in discussion with the legal people to transfer the land, the AMP Society land, to the DCC. So that's work in progress. We've closed our bank, we recovered our money from the bank so it doesn't get chewed up and lost in the ether there. So the next process is a formal documentation of handing the land back to the DCC, and there's no opposition to that at all. So, just being cheeky, Locks, is there any chance that that money from the AMP could be donated for the creation of a boat ramp? Well, yeah, that's not a bad idea. I don't know what the funds will be, Paul. I think they might be paltry in comparison to what we want to spend, but yeah, I'll certainly look at that.
What about a dog park?
No, forget dog. No, we don't need a dog park.
I think, look, we'll take that. It was just one of those off the cuff suggestions.
I'll keep it on the cuff.
Question that came up too, just in relation, it's actually outside of the area, but was actually what's happening at Vauxhall Jetty and the project there. There is some discussion that a new jetty is being built there by the end of March. Now, I was a little bit vague on that because it sort of affects it's outside of the area, but it sort of affects us as well. It's the beginning of the peninsula. People park there. There is boating activity, other bits and pieces. And this is again why a global strategy around recreational marine and boating recreation is actually required. The gate at Tomahawk. Now, this is an interesting one. The regional council have stated the proposed position for a gate at Tomahawk is now managed on land managed by the Department of Conservation, and the Parks and are now the Parks and Recreation team are now liaising with DOC So it's gone from being DCC to the Regional Council, now to the Department of Conservation. This is still for a security type gate, an unlocked security gate. On that, the community have done very well by putting up red cones across there to keep people away while the sea lions are there. And finally, the DCC property looking at reviewing work over the landscape plan for Tomahawk, which was asked, well, given it was actually suggested to the community that be done as part of a councillor's workshop more than 2 years ago. There's some discussion that the old school site has some residential one property to it, and the balance would be greenscape. So the property team are apparently deciding that, but I'm looking forward to seeing that, because I think as a board we need to. It's been on the agenda for the Tomahawk area for some time. Nice to hear the kids, or one of the boys from Mcandrew Bay raised the condition of Mcandrew Bay toilets. We had an email recently around that. I would still say there is still a need for an upgrade there. Although, and you will see in your notes, the 10-year plan does not include Mcandrew Bay. And I do feel that we should ask for those again. Given the popularity of the beach, do we go back to the hall, or do we then say, well, we need toilets at the beach itself? It seems to me that we need something to happen in that area from that point of view. You'll see at the back in your on page 25 there is a summary of the 10-year plan, and like I say, there is no consideration for toilets at Mcandrew Bay or an upgrade there. I would just say that there is 2023-2024 Harwood, and 2027 2028 the Otago Reserve. Now that's been an ongoing issue there with freedom camping, but also people just not using or not having a facility. And also 2028-2029 Tomahawk Beach will actually receive public toilets as well. So we had a few wins in the I guess in the LTP last year, albeit it seems that they're a long way away. Who knows? I might be retired by that stage.
Well, it's a no-brainer that they need new toilets at Mcandrew Bay with the car parks, with the yacht club right next to the recreation reserve.
Yeah, I agree, Locks. I think there's definitely a need, and I think we definitely need to hammer that point home again. I think to council through the annual plan submission that there is definitely the need there is actually quite high. And given also too that the hall is the one that actually holds the public toilets, yeah, we need to look at that as in a different way.
It's a complete safety issue. You know, you can't have kids running across the road regardless of how many crossings you've got. There's not a ginger group in Mcandrew Bay that can sort of get onto this and sort of do some fundraising, or chase it up, hunt it along. I think it falls back on the community. If they want that, then it's up to them to sort of lead the initiative and make sure that it does happen. Because I shudder every time I go through Mcandrew Bay, because the beach is very popular. It's got a high usage rate, and I'm always mindful that kids, even though they're under supervision, won't just bolt out the blue like that. It's ça la vie.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that we see these crossing points at Marion Street and they're put in as urgently as possible before the end of the financial year. But I do agree that we need to have a rethink about how the reserve and the beach fit into the wider facilities, either at the boat club or the hall. So I think I'll tackle that through the submission, and you'll see that through as a draft before it goes final. All right.
Yeah.
So I will now move that the governance officer's report be noted. We've made motions to deal with Otago Access Radio, and also the additional need for additional funding for the plaque, which you've seen. Item 10 is actually the Mcandree Bay public toilets that you will see. We've discussed, I think, enough, but there is an email there from a member of the public from there. We'll move on to board updates, and we'll start with you, Cheryl. Anything from your area that you want to discuss on your mind?
Well, what happened this last wee while? So there was the issue of the waste dumping of the boar carcasses, and I put an article in the Star, and Chris, you responded to that. And then there was also the community feedback with Waitaki Aurora Energy. So we put together a questionnaire, which hopefully you got, some of you, via email or on Facebook on the community pages, and you had to fill it in.
Yep.
And how you felt it all went.
Yep.
And Paul and I both agreed that this time around it was a lot more efficient than last time around.
Yeah. And
especially with the supply of generators. And the network Waitaki people have, they're going to draw 3 entries out of all the people that have responded, and the community board is going to ring these people and say that they have won a $100 voucher from somewhere. So that's quite nice of them to do that. And as I just said, I think the whole process was quite painless this time.
Yeah, and it was a large body of work done over at least a month. And you're right, it was. And I thank you for dealing with a lot of that, Cheryl, because it's not always easy, but it did go very smoothly, I have to say. They've learned a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Anything else in your area?
No.
No.
So far, touch wood.
Locks, anything from you, roads, Pukahiki, Highcliffe, that sort of stuff?
And nothing in terms of the, I suppose, the bailiwick I look after there. In terms of the roading, there's 1 or 2 points. I noticed that there is a spring coming away at the intersection of Highcliffe Road and Seal Point Road. And it's ponding quite badly. But for you, Lauren, I'll send this through. I'll email this report to you. The desert road, there's some slumps in the desert road, especially at the top of the rise, and I've seen 1 or 2 cyclists nearly come to grief there. The bitumen's chip falling away, and there's also with, I suppose, heavy dual wheel marks have made indentations at the tar seal, so that needs to be looked at. The gravel roads are okay, they stood up pretty well over the summer period, and we haven't had that sort of weather to affect them. I would ask that, can we find when the council are going to sweep the road at Broad Bay between Sandpiper Street and back right the way through? But I think, I know there's new seal there, but I think it's time has come now for a sweeping to be done. There were 1 or 2 people complaining about chips to windscreens.
Yep.
So I think that needs to be addressed. And the most critical one is the tar sealed portion of Cape Saunders Road. Now, I went out and had a look, and it's a pretty poor state. The slumping there, there's huge rips in the seal, maybe about 5 to 10 centimeters deep, obviously dual wheel marks. And what the problem is going to be is that 2 rural properties out there are soon going to engage forestry people to clear fell some of the plantations out there. There's going to be a lot of pressure put on that portion of the road there, A, on the tar seal portion because of the slumping, and secondly, the vegetation from the trees that hang over the roads on both sides of the road. I don't know if they're on road reserve or on private property, but I'd like to ask that council have a look at that, perhaps trim them back, given the fact that there's going to be logging trucks working that area there. I'm assuming that, in fact, if those projects go ahead, that they will have a TMP in place to have when the other logging operations have been done. But I'll forward you photographs as well, Lauren, of the condition of the road there, so you can append to the report and then pass it on to who you think would be responsible. That's it.
Very good. Thank you. Anzac Day locks?
Yes, at this stage, well, of course, we just had changes coming again yet for crowding of bits and pieces, but for the main service in Dunedin, it's going to be an audio-visual one done by Channel 39 in association with the DCC. And the only physical presence at the cenotaph will be a small group of people laying wreaths. So there'll be no speeches, no activity there at all. Everything's going to be pre-recorded. However, with the changes from yesterday, I don't know what's going to happen, but at this stage, the plan is to go ahead still as in a digital format.
Cool.
Anderson's Bay, Posey Lane, that will not go ahead. However, we're intending to put a box of poppies up there at Anderson's Bay so people can go during the day and place a poppy on the graves of their descendants if they so wish. Monticello at this stage, the service as I understand it, is not going ahead, mainly because there is no Defence Force support for any Anzac Day services this year. And having the announcements made yesterday and looked at the emails today, there's nothing from National Office from the RSA. So each area can do its own service and can adjust accordingly, but our plans are set in concrete at this stage. So there's nothing to prevent an outdoor service, for example, at Portobello being outdoors. Mcandrew Bay is the same. It's entirely up to them to organise.
My expectation is that we'll hear soon about wreath laying for Mcandree Bay and for Portobello.
Yes, I had a ring from Mrs. Bond. I don't think that they're going to go ahead Mcandrew Bay at this stage, but however the wreath is going to be laid, that's fine. And same with Portobello here. If the board's going to supply 2 wreaths, that's fine.
No, that's cool. Graham.
Nothing much really, sort of further to Lox's mention of the road through there. That new setup with the road since the shared pathway to put through there seems to be working pretty well. I've been keeping an eye on it over summer and during the weekends when there's lots of people using the reserve and the lots of boats coming and going. There seems to be a good amount of parking with the street parking that's there. So it's good to see that all working presumably as designed.
That's certainly been my view of it. I've seen a lot of people using the beach there. We haven't had the conflicts that have come up. You may have noticed that there's new signage being put up around the dog side of things. And I have had no negatives from the boat club. I visited them on opening day, asked them how things are going. Everything seems to be working for them. They do close the car park to public cars when they're setting up, and I have no particular problem with that because there's other parking available. So I think, to be fair, Graham, I think you've done a good job. I think we've all done a good job on dealing with that from that perspective, and getting and it's nice to still see the Pahuta Kawas flowered this year. So well done. Okay, Edna, anything from you?
Not a lot really. Mcandrew Bay we've pretty much covered. I mean, obviously, the toilets issue is always going to be an issue. Feels like that's never going to go away. I get quite frustrated about it.
It's the odour that lingers.
Is that what it is? The cycleway around the beach area, of course, is another thing that we need to be constantly working on how that's going to work out. And of course, the crossing from Marion Street across to the beach. And the one thing that I find quite frustrating is a lack of communication from those that I have contact with in at council. When we're trying to find out, like, for example, the Marine Parade fencing. Now, I was told some time ago that the plan for that was coming out and that it had been agreed to. And I sent an email wanting a response on that I could give you a report on. And I most often never hear anything. There was the issue also with, when are we going to get that crossing and the raised crossing there by the yacht club. And I've heard nothing about that either. And we were told that would happen after the speed limit review had been done. And I'm assuming the speed limit review is fully completed.
Just to go back to that was the update we received from Roading from Transport. Actually said that those crossing points will be finished in Mac Bay before July 31st.
Okay.
That was, sorry,
forward to it.
The wording for that was slightly different. On the comms issue, though, if you do have an issue with that, can you flick that through to Lauren and I, and
Yes.
you can deal with that from there. There was quite a large number of updates requested this time round because we didn't have a huge agenda and we hadn't heard anything about what was going on. So that was why it was. So
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mcendree Bay. Now the other one, of course, is Turonia. And the Turonia Reserve development is coming along really well. There's been a lot of clearing there. The planting is going to start in June. There's lots of development in terms of getting the concept design for the playground, extended playground put in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm pretty impressed with how it's going. I see by next summer we're going to have a real asset.
We are going to be open for business, I think. What I'm seeing in the clearance work with the new car park, which Fulton Hogan are doing, is looking pretty positive. It's made a huge difference to the reserve.
Oh yeah.
And it's it's taken a while, but all good things come to those who wait. Thank you very much for all of your updates. I'll move on to the chairperson's report, which is mammoth, and it's sorry, Graham.
Before that, I've got just a little piece from Keep Dunedin Beautiful.
Oh.
How do we chase up over the mural for the boat shed? And that seems to have fallen through the cracks a bit. But anyway, apparently the Runaka have approved the concept, and something is going to happen with that in the near future, although there wasn't any mention of community consultation on it, which my understanding was supposed to happen.
Well, I thought that had been done when Ellie Wallace was still coordinating Keep Dunedin Beautiful.
You may be right. It's a wee bit unclear, and it was
because I advertised that on social media, but that was about 18 months ago.
Yeah, the other thing was that I also asked about the bus shelters in Broad Bay, and apparently there is some movement happening on that, both to painting them and to organising design of a mural and so on. But it seems to be something that we're going to need to keep chasing, because that had gone a bit astray as well, as I understand it.
I raised it with the chief executive and the mayor at the board chairman's meeting that we have every 6 weeks, and said that the fact that those bus shelters had not been painted in the 18 months was disappointing. And that my understanding was that there was a problem with the procurement process around art and artists in public space, and that it was sitting without a toy. And the chief executive said that she would look into that and find out what's going on. So maybe that's what's happened.
Well, that certainly sounds as though it's what.
Because it annoys me every time I drive past here that they're not painted. It lets us down. It lets the project down. But it's just we just want to get on with it. You know, we want a place to look good. We are starting to open up potentially for business. Let's make the place look smart.
Have we got enough funding, around funding to paint the things white for a start, to put an undercoat on it?
We probably could, but I'm loath to do that because I don't think we should spend our money on maintenance. And the capital money for that painting is actually available in the council's budget. I don't think we should spend the community's money on doing something that councils have already got.
Just a suggestion, just to get them cranked up.
Yeah, well,
I have some other suggestions, but I won't say them here. Let's move on to my report. Heroica tracks. Now, I have to just put 2 hats on here. I'm wearing my board chair's hat, but I'm also wearing my hat where I'm the chair of the Heroica Trust. And we've been looking at the option of connecting Heroica Street in Portobello through Peter Cook's land up to the Heroica property, so that a walkway could be developed as an attraction for the peninsula, so that you could walk from Portobello to the top of Hereweka Harbour Cone without having to walk on Highcliffe Road. And the idea was to create it as a day walk project that would help accelerate business and connect with public transport and the cycleway. I have to be careful here because, as I say, I wear two hats. But as the Hereweka, the Hereweka Trust would like to join forces with the board and with Portobello Inc. to help try and fund that. We're not looking at a huge amount of money, probably $5,000 or $6,000, and mainly in signage and marker posts. The private landowners are quite happy for this to happen. I'm not going to present anything to you here because of my conflict of interest, but I'm just asking you and saying to you, it would be a fantastic opportunity to add something extra to the community, not only for the community recreationally, but also for visitors at the same time. And it is in the pipeline. I won't, as I say, I'm not going to go into anything further from here and ask you for anything because I can't, because it's a conflict of interest. But I would like to, at some stage, give you some idea of what that might mean, and then stand back from it and let you have a think about it from that point. Because
well, is there any draft drawings at all done?
I do.
Think it's a great idea, and I know that Hereweka Street's actually a public road.
Yes, it is.
So therefore, if you're going to deviate off the Hereweka Street onto private land, it's a council responsibility, obviously, to keep the public road clear.
Yeah.
But if there was a draft plan or a concept done, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
You know, because again, it opens up and it keeps people off the Highcliffe Road. And again, that's a safety issue that we've got to consider. So I'm quite comfortable with it.
So what I will do is I'll send you some draft material probably for the next meeting, and then step back from it.
If next meeting we find, Paul, if we just got some concept drawings, I think it's a great idea.
The idea is to put signage in the street saying you can walk from here to the Harbour Cone. It means too that if people wanted to do it as an overnight, they could stay here. They could stay at the campground or any of the accommodation places. They can get a coffee. They can have a meal at the pub. That kind of thing. It's just an alternative opportunity for both business, but also for the community. A lot of people go up there, but the only way to get there is you have to either drive up Highcliffe Road or walk. And we want to avoid that. As I say, Peter Cook, who's one of the private landowners, and Steve Cutler had a meeting with them. They are very keen, and it fits in with the management of the Harbour Cone Hereweka block. So I just see it as a really golden opportunity. But again, I cannot present that to you as a board chair. I need to stand aside from that. So I will do that for the next meeting.
So in doing that, can you ascertain if the remains of the old gold mine are on trust property or they're in private ownership?
Some of it, there's potentially some of it may be on the trust land, and also the other portion of it may sit on, I believe, Fiona Harrison's property. Right. But I can't give you the detail. But
okay.
I'm just looking at the time. I just want to crack on. The visit by the Minister of Transport, as you say, I've already asked you that we should write to the Mayor and Chief Executive requesting our attendance to that meeting. Annual plan process we've talked about. I did just giving an update on the Mayor and Chair's meeting, Graham, around the bus shelters and the artwork there, just around the procurement processes involved with that. COVID-19 support, a little bit superfluous now, I suppose, now that we're starting to see some changes. But again, I think just to let you know, I know of quite a number of people in the peninsula who have had or still have COVID. So just keep everyone and remind people that we still need to be safe and still need to power outages and survey. We've talked about that. Thank you, Cheryl, and also the Taurioni. So a while ago we had a presentation from Jenny Rock around putting in signage at Taurioni for beach education, and the City Council were not particularly enamored of the idea of funding that. I still feel that that is a good option for that. And what I'd like to suggest is that we budget $1,000 towards from our board fund as a contribution to that from the board for those signs for Turonia. And it's an open-ended thing depending on where they go and the part of the design project that Edna's involved with that. Is there any discussion about that?
I think the only issue with it, Paul, was the ongoing maintenance costs, maybe.
Maybe that the board has to deal with any of that. We're not looking at a huge amount of money, and if we do the signs right, they shouldn't be vandalised. So, like I say, I was just looking at, you know, perhaps saying, look, we would put $1,000 into that. It's probably more than enough, to be honest. Any other
So who's the recipient going to be, Paul? Can't go to an individual.
No, so it will be a board initiated project. The signs are already being developed by Jenny and the team at the Marine Science Centre. They have already done that. So what we would do, they have no money for installation and creation of signs, just they have the designs. I'm happy to allay that. I'm happy to allay that again if you want. We do that at the next meeting and we can have another discussion. Perhaps if you want to have a look at the designs again and refresh your memory on that, that'd be better.
Yeah,
I think it's essential when you look at the design.
The memorial plaque to Dave Cole, we've talked about that. The other thing is the Tomahawk catchment group. There is movement now from the regional council on the Tomahawk catchment group, and also some of the funding which was supposed to be available in the new financial year may be available this year. So I'll move that the board notes the update from the chair. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to, we're not going to necessarily need to now discuss the annual plan submission. I think the reason that
Paul, sorry, councillor update.
Yes, I'll just want to quickly finish this, because once the update from the council is done, the meeting will close. And the reason that item 14 is we've sort of done that today. We shouldn't discuss what our submission should be or the details of that in front of Councillor Wiley, because it is a conflict of interest. And I'm just pointing out that we're not actually going to deal with that agenda item today, because I think we've spoken about it through the community plan without actually giving away any of our state secrets. So now we'll move on to item 12, the councillor's update. Thank you, councillor.
Thank you. Probably you've touched many of the issues as such that I would have likely touched on. The area that I was really looking at for an update on was from the council meeting on the 22nd of February, where we had the report on Zero Carbon City Plan, which was the interim guiding principles and stages of work. We also had the DCC submission, improving the protection of drinking water sources. And one that was probably, there's a few roosters on the peninsula, so we also had the regulatory subcommittee recommendations of keeping animals, excluding dogs and birds bylaw, reviewed and passed. So that was all part of it. And I think the other one is really focusing and taking a lot of attention is around the Three Waters reform.
Yes, I think Three Waters is an interesting one, and you know, I think it seems every time, not to make too light a point on it, it seems every time it comes to some way, it seems to get diluted a little bit further, watered down, shall we say?
Well, we've got a council meeting on Tuesday, and I think it's probably going to be the #1 media item will be around the Three Waters reform and some notices of motion relating to that. So I've already this morning had media contacting me, so relating to that topic.
Always looking forward to reading the ODT in the morning, as I do. Item 15, items for consideration for the chair. I don't have any items of consideration. Is there anything else that the board or any of your board members would like to discuss? No, you're all looking content and happy, shall I say?
Yeah.
And obviously looking forward to lunch.
It's Lauren.
Yes.
There was one that was mentioned via email, a consideration for an update from the local police constable on speed
Yes.
and other issues.
One of the discussion points, and Lauren and I will pick this up in the agenda setting meeting, is the idea of inviting Constable Aaron Smith to the next board meeting for an update just on how things are going. And just what his activities and other bits and pieces have been, and particularly like to hear some of his discussions around road safety, and also his experiences as the new policeman taking over from Locks, just on how he has found the job and the role in the community, and those sorts of things. I'd be interested to hear from that. So we will make that invite to him for our next meeting. And on that note, as I say, I don't have any further items. I'm going to close the meeting. Just a reminder that about 5 or 10 seconds once the meeting's closed, we still remain live. So if you have anything pressing that you wish to speak or say out loud, please keep it to yourself until we finish. And at that stage, we'll be done. So thank you for your attendance, ladies and gentlemen. At 12:08, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you.